Our guest on this version of Ticket Volume is a former software developer turned researcher. He's got a ton of experience in lots of different roles, from CEO of Netman APS to CTO, serving 12 years at HP, long tenure at HP. He's currently managing director and fellow CTO at Micro Focus, as well as serving as a board member at the Open Group for almost 5 years. Welcome to Ticket Volume, news and information for improving IT experiences, powered by InvGate. Welcome, Lars Rosen.
Thank you, Matt.
Lars, I'm so glad to have you on today because I have to say that I'm sort of a fanboy of IT4IT, just learning a lot about it since Charlie Betts has been sharing tons of stuff about it in the States for the last few years. I'm sure he's involved in that, but I really just wanted to get you on to sort of introduce this alternative framework than the very popular and standard ITIL to my audience and to our audience on Ticket Volume. So why don't you talk just a little bit about IT4IT, what it is, and how we see it as different from ITIL?
So it started about a decade ago, really. And I read the books. I knew how to do ITIL. I was working at HP at that time. And what we experienced was that, okay, that's a best practice book. And then we go out and talk to our customers. And we were a tooling vendor at that time. We still are in Micro Focus. But how do you implement ITIL? So what do you put in place? What do you integrate? What is really the attributes of an incident? How do you connect it all together? And there was some best practice processes you should follow. Yes, fine in ITIL, but it doesn't say anything about how to implement it, really. And so I've been very interested in a telco standard called ETOM from the Telemanagement Forum, where they were much more prescriptive in defining the data architecture and the capability models and the functional application architecture needed in order to standardize how to manage telco. And I said, well, why don't we do something similar for IT? It really isn't that different. So I sat down and did that first in HP, and nobody wanted to listen to me because we were not supposed to do that kind of a work. Then I partnered up with some of my fellow customers and partners in the industry. So we were a gang of 7, Shell, Achmea insurance company in Holland, and another reinsurance company. AT&T was involved, Accenture, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and ourselves, and our own IT department, which is a huge IT department in HP at that day. And we basically said, let's do that. And let's promise the world and ourselves that we will give it away for free, right? So it wouldn't be an ownership of HP, because at the end of the day, this only works if it works for multi-vendor setting, right? And so we worked in the consortium for a couple of years, and I was the chief architect for that piece of work. And we got it sort of formed up to something that really had a good shape. Charlie Betts also got involved in some of the early work there. Then we looked for a standard organization to host it. Should we create our own one, or what should we do? And then Open Group was really the perfect fit. It's in the name, it's open, right? The way Open Group works is that anybody can become a member as an organization. And once you're done with the work within the Open Group among the members, we give the standards for free, right? It costs nothing to download it. You don't have to pay a fee for it. If you want a paperback, you need to pay a little bit for that, but who does that any longer, right? So we put it in there. We put it to a couple of revisions and got it released as really version 2, which was the first publicly released one, really. 1.3 was a snapshot. And then, 2.1 came a year or two later. That has been there for a long time, because then we sort of took a deep breath and said, okay, that was the first release on this. And what we did in that one, and I think that's pretty important, is that we introduced the concept of value streams for digital. And at that time, nobody talked about it that way. Today, everybody's talking about value streams, right? But at that time, value streams were nowhere to be found within digital. You went to manufacturing, yes, that's where it kind of was invented, right? That's fine. Porter was there, right? So we had a value chain of what happens in IT, and we had what become the famous strategy to portfolio, requirement to deploy, request to fulfill, and detect to correct as the stages that you go through, right? Iconic for the standard. But then we said, okay, now we got something that is actually workable, that people can use. And I've used it internally in Micro Focus, because I'm responsible now for the digital factory of Micro Focus. We have 5,000 developers that develop 300 different products, but we have a unified factory for that, where we can share information with a unified information model. That is based on IT4IT. and by and large implemented by our own products because we get our products to align to that as well. So it's a double win for me really to do this. So that's how it came about. That's what we set out to really deliver, the foundation architecture that can support ITIL. You don't need to do ITIL, but it can support ITIL very well. It's not in conflict. It's not in competition. It's complementary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the same goes for SAFe. If you go to the more development oriented, so IT4IT is end-to-end oriented, right? It's all the way from planning to building to delivery to running stuff. So ITIL is mostly on the delivery run part, right? But SAFe would be in the plan build side, and it can be supported there. So that's the starting part.
Okay, I like that. I really like that. You introduced it well. I'm holding back my cheering and applause because I love the idea of it being free. Anyone can be a member. You can just go and download it. It's 287 pages currently, so you heard it here first. Go to the open group, go register, download IT4IT, because I guarantee in the first few pages you will be converted. Lars put it perfectly. It complements a lot of the other frameworks. I really like that you spelled out those old value chains that were in the previous version. That really, like, you said all the processes right there. The fact that you said all those processes and that people can just start using them and adapting them to what they need, it really makes a lot of sense to me. You also mentioned previously that you use GitHub for this standard, and I really like that concept. So talk a little bit about that. How does that actually work?
That's one of the learnings we had when we made the 2.1 version, because we did that in a very traditional way. Well, it was collaborative effort, but it was Word documents that we had in a repository, and we had change bars and issue lists and all of that kind of stuff. And I actually had some of our people in my team almost full time just trying to manage that document, right? As you say, 280 pages being contributed by a multitude, maybe up to 50 different people, right? And that was 5 years ago, right? And even today with SharePoint and all of the other collaboration capabilities in Office 365, that's going to be really, really hard, right?
Yeah.
And so what we said, okay, the next versions, we're going to go all in, drink our own champagne, right? It needs to be a DevOps process. And so we set up a Git repository. We choose ASCII-Doc for the documentation markup language. We also set up, because it's a reference architecture, we set up a Git repository for the formal model in Archimate. So there is an open source tool called Archie that can work with Git, that you can model that. We made a couple of tools in Python that could convert between the formal model in Archimate Exchange format and the drawings and pictures and structure of that document. And so whenever somebody makes a change, you could do it in a branch. If I merge it into the main line, it gets compiled with a CI/CD tool chain constantly running. So all the modern way. And actually, it doesn't stop there. What we're going to do now that version 3 will be released very soon, we're going to use the Antora publishing system. So we prototyped that with a couple of other smaller pieces of work in the open group. And that would allow you, when you look at the published version, to directly click on a button on a given page and then issue change request or issues to the standard. Or if you are a paying member, you can click the edit button and actually go in and directly find the right place and do edits, and can then be merged in. So a completely quick feedback loop that we can then do. And we call that digital standards, or the modern way that standards should be developed. When we look at a lot of the other standards in the world, they're still using the very old-fashioned way of managing these kind of things, right? Even if they talk about agile and modern IT, etc. So that's pretty exciting, something I've spearheaded as part of my board position in the open group. So that's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Drinking your own champagne, a framework that leverages its own wisdom to develop itself, like that self-referential growth that really gives a lot of faith into something like that, And I just love the idea of being able to contribute and learn as a large group. And of course, we've all had the nightmare of trying to collaborate digitally across large communities, and it's not possible. So yeah, let's talk about version 3 a little bit. I read a little bit about the change notes. I really like some of the lexicon changes. I really like the idea of switching from a value chain to a digital value network, that it's not going to be something that's linear, it's going to spread out. Let's talk about that a little bit. What do you see as the primary changes in version 3?
Right. So there is a number of things that we noticed were problematic, if you will, with the current, the 2.1 version of it, which is the official released standard, right? And the first one was just the people, when they looked at it, they got the feeling this is waterfall. You plan, you build, you deliver, you run. Even though that actually the standard has a lot of looping capabilities, so it's all continuous, right? So it isn't waterfall, but you could get that impression. So that was one thing. The second thing is that there is a shift in the industry. It's the old discussion around what's on top. Is it the product or the service, right? And in IT, we tend to talk about service management. It's all about the IT service you deliver, which is a step up from just, well, I'm running some infrastructure, right? Or some apps, right? You need to be service oriented in how you deliver to your users. But the next step, and that's the big transformation from IT just being something that happens as a supporting organization to the rest of the business, that your business become digital, and the business is all about products. What are the products that you plan, you develop, and you deliver and potentially run from your customer? You need to have that product centricity, the product management role. It does imply a tectonic shift for a lot of IT organizations, because product management is about predicting what customers want to do, right? Mm-hmm. It's not about sitting back and waiting until somebody comes with a requirement and you prioritize and you deliver whatever requirement comes in, right? Whether it makes sense or not. So we changed the service backbone to be a product backbone in IT for IT. So that's a very important thing. And actually, really, I would love to change the name, but name stocks, right? To call it digital for digital and not IT for IT, because it's about information technology for information technology. It's not about the IT department's IT stuff, right? So that's another important thing. So product backbone. Now the product is then being delivered as services, right? So there is a service offer backbone as well in the new version of the standard, which we released as a snapshot early this year. Snapshot is not a formal standard, but it's an early release of where we are going with this. And then based on a lot of the input we got on the snapshot and all the processes that is around making sure we do a solid piece of work, we're actually in the Git system, we have issues being created, change requests essentially. So I counted yesterday and we had just around 700 issues being created and dealt with and implemented, formally accepted. And just yesterday, I finished the last one of them, signed it off. Everybody agreed on it within the core group. And now we have the final ready for standardization version. It goes into a voting process. It's still, as a standard organization, we need to adhere to that, and cross my fingers, voting goes all right, and then it'll be released as an official standard to a theater near you very soon, right? Or you can go and download it. But right now, today, you can go and log in and download the snapshot, which is a good indication of what comes in the final version.
Yeah, well, congratulations. That sounds like a huge effort and a large step to get over. So congratulations. I loved that concept of having products in IT because, of course, I think a lot of people have been seeing that that's how we need to deliver projects, and the services kind of underpin those products. Totally makes a ton of sense. Let's talk a little bit about it in practice, though, because I want to hear a little bit about how Micro Focus is using this specifically. What is it like being in a digital factory and leading that digital factory using this standard? What sort of benefits have you seen? What does your team think?
There are two main things that we have benefited enormously from. One is that it gives a taxonomy, if you will, on what are the functional building blocks you need to put in place in order to actually enter in being able to manage what you deliver, right? And so you need a source code repository, right? So it's not a big surprise. Everybody can understand that. And you can go in and you can use it to analyze, well, what do you currently have in your organization? Micro Focus is being created as the second largest European software company by a lot of acquisitions. So we had as many different source code repositories as we have products almost, right? When we started this roadmap some 5 years ago. And basically saying, well, yeah, that's fine. They are all good, some of them bad, but nevertheless, should we just select one and concentrate on that one, right? So could we agree that this is the source code repository we're going to use, right? And similarly for the backlog management. So backlog management, we use Octane. That's our own product for it. It's a great product for backlog management. And so we integrated those two things together and we built out with pipeline management, etc. So we created that continuous integration loop, which is essentially the requirement to deploy value stream, if you will. And that's the second part, is that in addition to building up all the functional component, I could actually also use it in product strategy, because Micro Focus is building all of these products, right, and selling it to our customers. Can see where are our blank spots, right? Where should we acquire or build out our functionality to really have something that works for our customers. So that helped a lot in that as well. But then the value stream thinking, right? And we very early on with it adopting value stream thinking, simply because we are the one that invented it. So obviously we sort of are early movers on that. And value stream thinking is about optimizing outcome, right? And so just a simple thing, we analyze into it and saying, well, how efficient were we from all the inbound issues and incidents that are being created in our customer care part of our business, right? And 10% of those actually needs to go back and become defects and be managed as defects, and then being patched out, right? But if you have a large organization with 40,000 customers, etc., how do you do that at scale? And it turns out that we had so many broken processes when you looked at that value stream, right? And once we analyzed it and we then automated and optimized it, we saved somewhere around 50 full-time equivalents, and we could tenfold increase the precision and speed on which we could actually deliver a patch and make sure customers are informed, right? Because we have that value stream thinking on doing that. That was actually the first one we optimized. It also goes back to the IT4IT standard, because we learned from that. And in the new version of IT4IT, the 3.0, we still have the grouping of functional components, the strategy to portfolio group of functionality, the requirement to deploy functionality, request to fulfill, and detect to correct functionality. But the value streams themselves, we've actually expanded out to being 7 value streams instead of 4. Because as we looked into it, the request to fulfill actually was not a single value stream, but 3 value stream stages. There's something about deploy, and then there's something about release. SAFe would talk about that as well. You deploy continuously and you release on demand. And then SAFe doesn't talk about, well, once you release something, you have a consume part, right? And consume is separate from release, and you should optimize both of those. So we have these 3 value streams instead of a single one there. And then we also looked at the, in addition to continuous planning, there's a continuous, which we call explore now. There is an evaluate, which is the overarching, let's make sure we actually understand what is going on and feed that back in. So that gives them a much more rounded system of 7 value streams that makes up the entire IT4IT value network, if you will. So that's another one of the big changes.
Okay. Yeah, I like hearing how you're seeing the benefits from it. The part that really caught my ear was the part where it's showing you the gaps in your portfolio. Because that's something that portfolio management has always been this very boring shepherd. You've got a bunch of sheep out there and you're just watching them. There's no real interaction between that process and some of the other processes. So I really like that you pointed that out. Because
right. And that actually also got into the IT4IT standard itself. We're now actually having a value stream object in the standard itself. So
Okay.
your own business value streams, you can start managing them as part of understanding your portfolio. Because if you don't, why are you having that bag of products in your portfolio, right? It's because you're supporting some value streams at the end of the day. And then that way you tie it all together. So that's also part of it. Yeah.
It makes sense. It's taking the genius of CI/CD and applying it to almost every process. Everything should be a loop, always.
Yep.
It seems so simple when you say it and explain it, but it's so difficult to put into words and into a standard. So I appreciate your efforts.
And of course, there's also the other part of it about a standard is to say you can always do it in 15 different variations, right? But let's just once and for all agree on it, right? And we had long discussions about some of these topics, right? It can be pretty boring and it can be very frustrating at times, right? But now we've settled with something, and let's then go with that, right? It's you can always find things where it would have been smarter if you'd done it slightly differently, but this actually works, and that's a good thing about it. It's done in parallel with some organizations actually implementing, especially our own microfocus organization. So I know it works, right? It's not a piece of theory, right? It's actually backed up with real experience.
Okay, awesome. Lars, where can people go to learn more?
Yeah, the main thing you go to is the open group. And we are in the process in the open group of as I mentioned earlier, with Antora and making a smarter publishing front end. We haven't implemented that yet, so it's still slightly complicated to go in. We need to get to a point where 3 clicks and you get to whatever information you're interested in, and that's the goal. We are not there yet. So you need to go in and register you as a user. That's free. Won't send you a lot of spam mail. So you register, and then you search for the IT4IT version 3 snapshot, and you download that one. And you wait a couple of more months, and you will be able to also download the final standard on it. And of course, there are complementary white papers and things around it. So that's one area. You can also participate in some of the conferences we have in the open group where we discuss this stuff. There will be one in Washington in 3 months from now in the summer. There will be something in India soon in May. And so that's another way. You can also contact one of our vendors that are participating. So Microfocus, you can contact. We know a ton of stuff on this. We have consultancy around it. We'd be happy to have a discussion about it. You can contact me by email or via LinkedIn. I'll be happy to send you in some direction for this. I'm really excited about IT4IT, as you can hear. So I'll be happy to help anybody that wants to know more.
Me too. I really do love it. So thank you so much for your time, Lars. I hope to see you in Washington.
Same here. Hope to see you there, Matt.
And for our audience, thanks for hitting play, and I'll see you around the way. Post a review and send feedback about our podcast, or subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms. I'm your host, Matt Barron. You can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter, Facebook as Matt Barron. Thank you for listening to Ticket Volume, a podcast powered by InvGate.